Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unlock Efficiency with Automations in Monday.com. Really glad to have everyone today. My name's Curran. I'm going to be manning the chat box. Of course, the real star of the show is Lee Watkins, who will be the main host of today. Lee, over to you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Lee, and I'm a software trainer for Omnitas. Like Curran, I am based in London, but I am originally from New York. Apologies for the American accent. We have a fun Halloween-themed use case for you today, and we're going to talk about automations. So I have a little agenda for us. I will just share my screen. Okay, so today we are going to talk about what an automation is, how to create them, what we use automations for, common uses of automations. We're going to give some examples through our use case of those common automations uses, and then we'll have a little Q&A. I hope you guys are excited about this because I am as well. So first of all, what is an automation? What do we use automations for? I've written a cute Halloween-themed explanation of this. So automations in Monday.com are like helpful ghosts in your workflow. Just as ghosts can perform mysterious and beneficial actions behind the scenes, automations work tirelessly in the background to streamline your processes and make your work easier. They silently carry out repetitive tasks, ensuring that deadlines are met, notifications are sent, and data is organized, all without requiring constant human intervention. Like benevolent apparitions, automations lend a hand without making their presence known, and ultimately, they free you to focus on more creative and strategic aspects of your work. And now we will get on to creating automations. So I'm going to open our automations builder here, and I'm going to explain how you create an automation. So an automation is comprised of a trigger. There are many different triggers you can potentially use, a condition, and an action. And there are sometimes multiple conditions and actions. So the trigger is the event of your choice, which initiates the automations process. It can be any of these items. The condition is a prerequisite that the trigger has to satisfy for the automation to be activated. So for example, I can say when a date arrives, or when a status changes, we can have an action occur. So let's say when a status changes to something, then we have our action happen. And the action can be sending an email, moving an item to a group, assigning a person. There are lots of possible outcomes. So there are many possible triggers for automations. You can choose to have the creation of an item, a status change, the assignment of a person, or the passage of a particular amount of time. Any of these can be used to trigger an action. And likewise, there are many possible conditions. For example, you may only want the automation to be triggered if a certain threshold is reached in terms of like numbers, or if a particular person is assigned to an item. So what can we automate? Here's a massive understatement. We can use automations for many purposes. We can use them to create items and to move them within groups, to assign people to tasks, to create project boards from templates, to transfer ownership of boards. The list goes on and on. So today we're going to review some often used applications of automations, including sending notifications, for example, about unfinished or new tasks, to replicate steps for recurring tasks, and in conjunction with the dependencies to create a workflow between dependent items. These are only a few examples, and there are many, many other ways to configure this function, but I hope the demonstration today activates your imagination and gets you inspired with creating your own workflow. Today we have a Halloween-themed use case to explore the concept of automations. I've created a workflow for a fictional real estate company called Frightmove. We have a number of haunted houses to sell, and we are trying to match the properties to our ghoulish potential customers. I'll just show that to you. Here are our properties. These are all famous locations in London that are haunted. If you feel like adding one to my list, please feel free to contact me separately. I love visiting haunted pubs and similar locations. And we have a list of leads. So we have Jack Torrance from The Shining. We have Regan McNeil, who is the antagonist in a horror franchise that I'm sure you recognize. And we have some other fun characters. So please bear in mind, this is not a very realistic representation of a real estate use case. Our focus today is on the automations and not on the use case itself. Let's review some ways we can use automations to reduce manual repetitive work. And our focus is trying to get to the parts of our job that we really take pride in by removing the parts that are sort of more repetitive and robotic. To create an automation, we are going to enter our automation center here and add a new automation. You can also use a pre-written recipe, but in this case today, I'm going to focus on custom automations. And there are really only 4 cases in which you should use pre-built automations. So one is reoccurring automations. Another is using a keyword from an update as a trigger, dependency automations, and sub-item to main item automations. So you can access these through the pre-built recipes, but today we are talking mainly about custom ones. So I'm going to build this automation in front of you. So I'm going to begin with my custom automation trigger when an item is created. And I'm going to tell it to notify myself. So when an item is created in our leads board, so let's say someone approaches us and they are interested about buying a property, that person can be added to our board. I want to be notified. So I'm going to tell it to notify me. And I'm also going to use our dynamic fields to write a notification for myself. So hello username, in this case myself. Item name has been added to our board. And in this case, because it's dynamic fields, this will be changed depending on what the actual answers to this are. I will fill in my own name, the name of the person being added, and the name of the board. Okay, cool. So I have created a notification for myself, and I'm going to fill out our little form. And actually, I want to view this. I want to view this as if I'm the person signing up. So we have our cute little Fright Move logo, and I'm going to fill this out as Carrie White. So you might remember Carrie White from the film Carrie, in which she's the protagonist. It's a novel by Stephen King, and she's the protagonist. She is a very shy girl who gets bullied by her classmates, and she has a very overprotective mother. And it all comes kind of spilling out when she gets revenge on prom night. You might remember the scene where she has blood pouring all over her face. It's terrifying. This could have possibly been avoided if she'd been able to get her own place. I'm not going to say all of it could have been avoided, but like, you know, some of it, if she had some personal space and, you know, she wasn't being over supervised by her mom all the time. Anyway, let's say Carrie White is interested at.
Lee, I think you're showing the wrong screen because we can't type.
My mistake. Sorry. Okay, so here's our form for our buyer inquiry.
Perfect. Thank you.
Here's our Fright Move logo. Here's the name of the person, Carrie White, who is our shy, bullied high school outcast. And here is her email, carriewhite@apple.com. And she's going to submit this form. You can customize forms in a lot of different ways. It's not what we're focusing on today, but if there's enough interest, I can possibly do a webinar on it in the near future. So I'm going to submit the form. And this will make an item appear in our board. Cool. I'll go back to our main table. Cool. So here's Carrie White. And also I have received a notification. Fantastic.
Awesome. There's just another question that we've received. So around the automation where you said, once something's created, please notify so-and-so. Someone's asked, if I want to notify multiple people, can I set up some sort of team to notify them so I don't have to
absolutely
every single time?
Yes, you can also notify people. You can also notify multiple people at once. That's definitely possible.
Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. So I've also added an automation that I've pre-built to send Carrie a thank you for filling out our form. And in my case, I've integrated Monday.com with Gmail, but you could also use Outlook or a different email service. So I've set up a notification so that she receives an email to say thank you. So I have the same trigger when an item is created. I have my Gmail set up, so she'll receive it from lee@omnitas.com. And this is sent to whatever email address the person has inserted into their form. And we have an email here I've written. Thank you for registering with Fright Move. Whether you're searching for a haunted mansion, a bona fide bungalow, or a bewitching cottage, we're committed to guiding you through the process so your new home feels like it's been under your spell all along. Of course, you could customize this to say whatever it is that you would want to say to the person submitting the form. So great. Now, when an inquiry is submitted, the person completing the form receives a confirmation email. I'm just going to discuss default item values. When we click on this button, the 3 dots, we have a few options: pin columns, item height, conditional coloring, and we have item default values. And this can be really, really useful so that you don't have to repeatedly assign an item to yourself. If everything in this board is assigned to me, I can have it automatically set so that it's assigned to me already. And this just reduces some of the repetitive things that I might need to do. So I'll also add an automation that assigns a creation date to new items so that we can quickly see when they were added. And I think that should be active already. Yeah. So when an item is created, set the date to today. And so all of this means that instead of repeatedly adding these pieces of data every time I add an item, it will already have those pieces of information automatically assigned. Cool. So I'm going to add another lead to our board. And I'm going to go into our into the perspective of our prospective buyer. And in this case, we have Norman Bates. And of course, if you've seen the film Psycho from 1960, you know that Norman works at the Bates Motel. Norman Bates is the antagonist of Psycho, which was directed by Alfred Hitchcock, who has been one of my favorite directors forever, since probably since I was too young to really be watching his movies. I shouldn't have been watching them at that age. Norman is a mild-mannered mama's boy who runs the Bates Motel with his very jealous and possessive mother. Fun fact, the film's murder scene in a shower shocked audiences when it came out in 1960. And the blood in that scene was actually Hershey's chocolate syrup, which shows up a lot better on black and white film, and it has more like realistic density. It works better in a visual format. Yet again, a tragedy that might have been prevented, I'm not going to say definitely, but might have been prevented by Norman having some independence and getting his own flat. Possibly. Maybe we can help Norman with finding his own space. So I'm going to submit this form. Cool. And I'm going to go back to our leads board. And now 3 things have happened. So I'm automatically assigned to Norman. I receive a notification of him being added to the board, and he has the creation date today. So we know when he submitted his inquiry. And then what we can do if we want to create a series of cascading automations, we can set up follow-ups and say, okay, this person contacted us 2 days ago. Let's send a follow-up email, or let's check if this person has replied yet based on the date which they submitted their inquiry. Cool. Sometimes it takes, 60, 90 seconds for the notification to come through, but there's my notification. All right. So we will move on to generating a new board from a template. This is something that I often get asked. To prepare in advance, I've created a template board, which I will show you now. Cool. Here's our lead template. Before we can show properties to a lead, we have to do the following tasks. So we need to confirm their requirements, figure out how many bedrooms they need, the location, and so on, confirm their budget, and we need to ask them to sign an NDA. And the NDA is a key element of property viewing in case they see a ghost while they're visiting. Again, not a very realistic representation of a real estate use case, but I'm just using this to illustrate our automations. So I'm going to go back to our leads board, and I have an automation set up so that when a lead changes to working on it, it will create a new board with the name of that lead. So essentially, a buyer has submitted an inquiry. We figure out we approve that buyer to join, that potential buyer to join our leads list. And when we start working on that item, then we create a new board specifically for that person from that template to go through all the steps that we would need to qualify that potential buyer. In this case, I have a dynamic label for this. So the label for the board will be the person's name. You can obviously configure this differently. You can also have a separate, you can specify what workspace you want it to be in, what folder you want it to be in, and who the owners are, and so on. I also want to move this item into the active group. So let's say I change Norman Bates' status to working on it. Norman will get moved down into our active list. There he is. And also it will create a new board with his name. There he is. Excellent. Cool. So here is our list of items for qualifying Norman as a buyer. Cool. Now we're going to talk about automations and dependencies. So automations can be very useful when we're using them in combination with dependencies to create a workflow between related items. And in this case, I've created a sort of set of dependencies so that the housing requirements must be fulfilled, and that starts our budget consultation. And then once those two are done, then we get on to signing our NDA.
Just a quick question there, Lee,
Yeah.
That we've had from the chat. So one of the questions is there a limit on how many actions you can add as if this happens, do X, 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 and X?
So I believe there is a limit, but the limit is very, very high. I think it might be 500 actions. I will just double check that. Okay, so the standard plan is 250 actions for automations.
So yeah. Okay, but I think the question, just to rephrase that, was when you're building out the automation, and then you can say, when this happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. Is there a limit on how many pluses you can add onto that automation? Does that make sense?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely certain if there's like a list of you can only do 10 or you can only do 15. I would say for clarity of purpose, I probably wouldn't recommend doing it like that, because when you have many, many things dependent on one action, if you make a mistake somewhere along that chain, you're going to have to change everything else. it's going to make your life more complicated. That's not how I would recommend setting it up.
Okay. Thank you very much. Cheers, Lee.
No problem. Okay, so we are talking about using automations in conjunction with the dependencies to create a workflow between dependent items. Our budget is dependent on our housing requirements, and our NDA signing is dependent on our budget confirmation. So I've added the dependency column here, and I have specified that relationship between the different items. I've also created an automation here. So this automation is when status changes to done, change the status of its dependent item to working on it. And this means that when one task is complete, the status of the next one will automatically update to show that it's in progress. So I can demonstrate that by saying the housing requirements are done. And that means that our budget turns into working on it. So we could potentially use this in conjunction with notifications. So for example, if the lead is passed to a different department, when we move on to a different item, we can notify that department when a particular stage has started, or if there's a particular person that handles the NDA signing, perhaps they're a legal person, then we can add another automation to say, when this item changes to working on it, then notify this person. There's lots of potential uses. I'm going to discuss just briefly having an automation so that when the NDA changes to in progress, an NDA document is generated. So to automatically generate the NDA, we have a DocuGen integration added to our board. I've created a view here to set up the template. Again, this is not our topic today, so I'm not going to get into a huge amount of detail. Cool. This isn't specifically our topic today to talk about DocuGen, so I'm going to just kind of blow through this. I'm sorry that it's not super involved, but maybe at some point in the future we can do a different automation, a different webinar to talk about that. And we'll add a new automation, and we're going to say when this particular button is clicked, DocuGen. Oh, sorry, I should be in our integrations. Yeah, there we go. So I've already set this up. So when button is clicked, we want to generate a document using the settings from the DocuGen view. And this simply means that when I click the button to generate the NDA, it will use the dynamic fields to create that item. And when we've completed our housing requirements, we have completed our budget, and now we're going to sign our NDA. And I'm going to say, create the NDA. Aha, okay, and our NDA is now created. Cool. So now we have an NDA agreement between Frightmove and Norman Bates. And they can both sign it. And then happily, we hope Norman can move out of his mom's place, get his own place. Maybe also he should see a therapist. This is just one of many steps that could have prevented the events of the film Psycho. Cool. So now we are ready to start showing our spooky properties to Norman. I'm going to go back to our agenda. Cool. So today we have covered all of these topics we have discussed. And I'm going to say these are all, oh, we haven't done our Q&A, but I'm going to say everything else is done. And we've discussed all of these types of automation. So we've discussed notifications within the Monday platform. We've discussed email notifications, item default values, adding a creation date, sending a thank you email in reply to form submissions, creating boards from templates. We've gotten into dependencies and automations a little bit. And we've also shown generating a document with an integration. And that is all the material I have today. So we can get on to our Q&A.
So there's no questions coming through on the chat right now, Lee, but awesome job. I think it was really insightful. So thank you very much for that.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. Cheers. Bye.